How many of you have Apothecary Diaries on your watch list and haven't watched it yet? How many of you have never heard of Apothecary Diaries before? Maybe you were stuck watching free run during winter and fall of 2023 and 2024. Well, if you were stuck watching free run and have yet to watch Apothecary Diaries, here's what I have to tell you. You are completely missing out. And the fact that Apothecary Diaries is coming out with a season 2 in winter of 2025, which we are only 6 months away from, I'm here to basically tell you and explain to you that you should bump Apothecary Diaries up on your list kind of quickly and kind of soon because it has so much going for it. In this video, we'll be going through what makes Apothecary Diaries so great, why it was actually another fan favorite, and kind of sad if this show got swallowed up by the free run craze that was happening earlier this year, late last year. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Annie Mel. If you haven't been here before, I'm Mel, the host of this channel. Before we dive into this video, here's a quick synopsis on the Apothecary Diaries. Mao Mao, our apothecary in the title Apothecary Diaries, is working in the red light district at a brothel. And one day as she goes out to pick some medicinal herbs, because that's essentially the job of an apothecary, it's working with poisons and drugs, kind of like a doctor to some extent. And as she is out about picking herbs, some kidnappers kidnap her and sell her off to the royal palace. And if I did not mention, the Apothecary Diaries is set in some fictional country placed in older imperial China. And within the imperial palace, she kind of starts off as a laundry servant or maid. And in hopes of keeping her head down so that she could finish her 2 to 3 years there and go back home to her father, she finds herself embroiled in mysteries and dramas of the royal palace because one day she gets a little overly curious about concubines and their children that are very, very ill, gets noticed by this very influential eunuch who goes by the name of Jinshi. He's like real freaking beautiful, and ends up working in a different type of position where she ends up helping some of the royals uncover these mysteries within the royal palace and between royal members. So you'll encounter a lot of mystery, drama, suspense, a little bit of comedy if that's something that you're into. But without further ado, let's dive deeper. And with a little bit of introduction to the Apothecary Diaries and its synopsis, we're going to dive into the different elements as to what makes Apothecary Diaries so bingeable. So first things first is our main character. We're probably going to spend most of our time talking about Mao Mao, our main character, because I personally feel like without Mao Mao, there is no Apothecary Diaries, obviously, but she is kind of the glue, the synergy, and what makes Apothecary Diaries so addictive to watch. So when we first get introduced to Mao Mao in the very first episode, in the first few minutes, we can see that she's experimenting and playing around with poisons. So much so that she experiments on herself that throughout, I want to say the entire show or entire season 1, she has a bandage wrapped around one of her arms. We learned that Mao Mao is very interested in the aspect of being an apothecary, but even more so the poisons that she gets to work with. So much so that you could kind of say that she's obsessed. At some point, she gets moved into a role at the imperial palace where she is tasked with tasting poison for the royals. And while most servants for the royals find this task extremely scary because you could die or be paralyzed or permanently damaged for life while taste testing for these poisons, this actually makes Mao Mao extremely excited. And most times she's kind of characterized as this really cute chibi cat when there's any mention of poisons that she gets to work with, or rare herbs, spices, and drugs. And quick fun fact about Mao Mao's name and why she's kind of characterized as a cat is that Mao means cat, I think, in Mandarin. So essentially her name means cat. But what makes her obsession and her engagement or love of poisons, drugs, and more so interesting is that we learn how knowledgeable Mao Mao is. And even though she understands that there's some intricacy that she finds interesting in poisons, she knows that it's severely dangerous and heavily reprimands people for using it in any incorrect form or matter. And not only has her obsession with poisons and illnesses made her so knowledgeable in that area, it has also helped her become very deductive in other ways. For example, just by observing the physique of a person, she's able to kind of tell what kind of lifestyle that they live, or perhaps what kind of job that they work. And it makes her very observant of people who come across as ill or sickly, as she tries to deduce what type of illness that they have so she can find a treatment for them. This is what initially captures Jinxi's attention and some of the attention of the other royal members, or the concubine in the royal court, I should say. And with Mao Mao's deductive skills, since she uses a lot of these skills to kind of help treat any potential patients that she gets as an apothecary, she ends up being the pseudo Sherlock Holmes of the Imperial Palace. And it's so fun to watch, mainly how Mao Mao processes some of the events that happen at the royal palace that lead her to some of the conclusions to solve some of these mysteries. And a lot of that is through her inner monologue, which adds to the title of the Apothecary Diaries, because we're kind of getting her side of the story, mostly through her narration and through her eyes. And her detective deductive skills is actually what gets her put into a different position, from being a laundry maid to being a poison taste tester and helper of the concubines of the royal palace. So not only is Mao Mao extremely intelligent with poisons, she has amazing detective skills, but furthermore, Mao Mao is a really interesting main character because she likes to keep to herself. She's extremely cautious, sometimes cunning so that she can get her ways. But Mao Mao has this duality, as I mentioned earlier. Whenever it comes to poisons, she gets extremely excited and cannot conceal it, to the point that sometimes her hidden agenda is never so hidden. And even though I mentioned that she can be cunning and calculating so that she can get her own ways, it's never in any malicious way. It's usually so that she can get her hands on some drug or herb goodies. It's also so that she doesn't wrongly cross any of the royals or higher nobles or figures within the royal palace, because if anything, she's but a loyal servant, and she constantly reminds us as viewers and herself what her position is. But going back to my main point, sometimes she defects from this cautious, calculating nature when she sees someone in trouble, whether someone of a lower rank or status, or someone that's perhaps being bullied within the story. And she goes out of her way to help them, which also goes against the fact that she doesn't want to be recognized or seen or to appear too much on anyone's radar, which contrasts her keeping a low profile so that she doesn't upset or ruffle the feathers of any of the royals or high figures in the palace. So there's this very dual side to Mao Mao that you can't help but love, because sometimes she breaks her own rules that could mean the sacrifice of her well-being or her life. But one of the sides that I love about Mao Mao the most is that she's extremely witty and extremely funny. And just like how she can't hide her excitement when it comes to poisons and drugs, she can't hide her disgust and disdain when it comes to Jinxi sometimes, who is, I guess you could say, the male lead of the Apothecary Diaries, if I haven't mentioned that already. And it's probably what got me to watch the Apothecary Diaries in the first place, because there's this scene that she's working for Jinxi, and she's in extreme thought pondering about some mystery case that she's working on. Jinxi sneaks up on her, and she kind of has this horrified, like horror anime movie-esque type of face. And when I saw this photo on Instagram, it drove me immediately to go watch the anime, and I do not regret, not once, picking up and binge watching it. So much so that I've probably watched it 2 times full round and watched tons of clips. Also to prepare for this video, not just because I love the Apothecary Diaries. But Mao Mao as a whole is such a captivating main character, female lead for a lot of the newer anime that's out today, that brings the whole story together. And I kind of want to say that she is the story, you know, she's in the title and she drives the whole narrative. And unfortunately, the other characters aren't really as intriguing or captivating enough that Mao Mao really is the biggest selling point of the Apothecary Diaries. However, she is not the only selling point. As I mentioned in the synopsis and in describing Mao Mao's character, you could kind of tell that Mao Mao ends up getting caught up in some conspiracies and mysteries and some behind the scenes stuff going on at the Imperial Palace that we don't know much about. This leads us to the story itself. The way that the Apothecary Diaries starts off is very episodic. Each and every episode, Mao Mao is kind of solving a case, or testing for some poison, or tasting for some poison, and learning more about the back part of the Imperial Palace with each episode. And as we and Mao Mao get to learn more about the people involved with the Imperial Palace, the story starts to get deeper and deeper. What starts off as her helping and saving the lives of some of the concubines and their baby turns into an even larger conspiracy. And at the sake of not spoiling this, I won't be diving into what these conspiracies and deeper stories are. But if you start off the anime and you feel like it's very surface level and not in depth, it does take some time, probably 1/3 into season 1, which maybe puts us at around 7 to 8 episodes, since there are 24 episodes in season 1, to really see that there's something bigger at hand going on that Mao Mao kind of accidentally stumbles into because her curiosity of poisons gets her there. And yes, the way that the story picks up pace exponentially is what also makes it so bingeable. It goes from this casual-esque story to you at the end of every episode wondering what is going to happen next, because the cliffhangers are literally unbearable. And while Mao Mao is the biggest selling point as a character for the entire story, the anime does at some point start to introduce new characters that become a challenge for Mao Mao. Because for the most part, she's kind of regarded as one of the smartest characters in the story. And she is. But just like a Sherlock Holmes story, you need a challenger. Basically your Moriarty, I would say. And Mao Mao eventually finds herself some challengers that I think we may be seeing continue into season 2. So at the risk of repeating myself, and as I mentioned in the beginning, or somewhere in the beginning, Apothecary Diaries does give that Sherlock Holmes type of vibe. And if you do like a Sherlock Holmes story, or variations of Sherlock anime, because there's a ton out there that exist, I would say the Apothecary Diaries is a more unique version of that, but has some element to it. And one of my favorite parts about the Apothecary Diaries, aside from Mao Mao and the mystery suspense element of Apothecary Diaries, is the humor. While the story does indeed get more intense and have a heavier tone to it as the episodes go on, Mao Mao does not fail to deliver quality humor. Most of it does come away via her interaction with Jinchi, because Jinchi is this beautiful man, and he's a man that kind of uses his beauty to his advantage, to essentially take advantage of others and gain power in the Imperial Palace as a eunuch. But she finds his use of beauty kind of disgusting. She finds him a lot of it repulsive in the first few episodes, that she's always trying to run away from him. And Jinchi finds this extremely fascinating because all of the women, servants, and royals and concubine find him extremely attractive and kind of end up giving him whatever he wants because of that. But Mao Mao is quite the opposite. And I guess you could say, when you can't have something, you want it even more. So he finds Mao Mao so interesting and instantly starts to gravitate to her more and more. And with Jinchi gravitating towards her more and more, Mao Mao becomes more expressive about her disgust for Jinchi, or sometimes her confusion for his weird behavior towards her. And she has a hard time not outwardly expressing it through her facial expressions, even if she doesn't use her words. But sometimes some of her words are witty enough to jab him, but she doesn't do it intentionally. She does it in a very roundabout way and is almost able to get away with it each time. But Mao Mao and Jinchi's humorous dynamic aside, sometimes her thought process as an apothecary puts her in other humorous situations. Because sometimes her obsession and interest in poisons and drugs and herbs sometimes makes her oblivious of certain social situations. An example of that would be is she requests a meeting with one of the Imperial soldiers. She sees this as an opportunity to get her way back home. And this guy initially thought it was her showing some romantic interest. The situation ends up being quite humorous because first there's a misunderstanding. But this misunderstanding turns 180 for this soldier, Lee Haku, because Mao Mao is there with a plan to extort this man for what she needs, but not without an exchange. This story bit eventually goes the long haul with its humor because Jinchi finds out that she was taken home by this soldier and thinks something rated X happened between them. Another misunderstanding situation, because Mao Mao is explaining it to him in the most vague words, and Jinchi is coming up with all these crazy ideas. And Mao Mao kind of misses some of the social cues in that moment to indicate that there is a confusion going on. And despite all of Mao Mao's amazing qualities, you do get to learn about her sad backstory and her upbringing, which we will not be talking about in this video. I don't want to spoil this for you guys. But with Mao Mao's character, she takes kind of her difficult upbringings and some of her trauma that is often presented in her dreams and nightmares. She uses that at some point in the story as a tool and strength to create a resolution within the second part of Apothecary Diaries. And if you've already seen the Apothecary Diaries, you may know what I'm already talking about. For those of you out there who have not seen it, by the time you watch it, you'll fully understand. So she is one character that doesn't allow her hardships to, one, define her, and two, hold her down. Even though you do see that she harbors some feelings of hatred for what has happened, which to some extent she may be in denial about, she does ensure that it is not a defining feature of her character. And some smaller aspects about the Apothecary Diaries that I really love and enjoy are the semi-educational portions. And even though, as stated at the beginning of every episode after the intro song, I think, or maybe at the very beginning, that the workings of the Apothecary Diaries is largely fictional place, fictional stories, fictional people, there are some semi-educational elements that presents itself through the poisons, the drugs, the illnesses, and some other related details in the Apothecary Diaries. Here are some examples that you'll find that, one, I either already knew about, or two, learned about while watching this. So the things that I kind of already knew about is that poisons are kind of out there everywhere, even in our foods. And certain things can become a poison in large quantities. You may be familiar with the fact that alcohol is indeed a poison, especially in large quantities. Like, have you ever heard of alcohol poisoning? And the fact that our livers need to detox this anytime our body ingests it. There's an episode in which a character consumes a large quantity of salt that could also be poisonous, because a human's body is made of so much water that if you were to ingest so much salt, that would cause you to become highly dehydrated, which could lead to death. Pufferfish, which is something that's eaten in some countries, can be poisonous if not prepared correctly. And even some everyday flowers and plants are highly poisonous. And in the story, which was actually very new to me, it's explained that honey can be quite bad and borderline lethal for babies. Even though it's part of a lot of desserts, it's put in tea to be consumed every day by human beings. And apparently the reason for this is, if you do a little bit of research, is that honey contains a certain bacteria that is extremely deadly for babies under the age of 1. And to even take it a step further, for those of you out there who have an allergy, especially a food allergy, that is deadly, and I guess to some extent can be considered a poison for a unique individual. So if these are a lot of things that you're not familiar with, the Apothecary Diaries kind of helps educate you on some new aspects of life, whether it's historical, whether it's medicinal, whether it's around poisons and food. And the last thing that I kind of want to highlight that maybe I should have highlighted when I was talking about the story is that one thing about Apothecary Diaries that I feel like has in common with some other really popular anime in the few recent years is that it covers so many different genres. Like the likes of Free Run and Spy Family, it covers suspense, it covers comedy, it covers drama. There's, I could say, a little bit of action in it too. It's not like Jujutsu Kaisen action or shonen action, but there is some action that is had within the show. So Apothecary Diaries is structured in a way that it can apply and appeal to so many walks of fans. So if you're someone who has Apothecary Diaries on their list or has never heard of Apothecary Diaries before until this video, hopefully I've convinced you to give it a chance and watch it before it releases season 2 in winter of 2025. And if you have seen Apothecary Diaries before, let me know down in the comments below why you love Apothecary Diaries so much. Maybe it's something I did not highlight in this video. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, subscribe, or share with somebody else. And if you're someone who has watched Apothecary Diaries before, you can hit me up on Instagram or Threads so that we can gush over Apothecary Diaries together in anticipation of season 2. Oh, and if you don't know where to watch Apothecary Diaries, you can currently watch all of season 1, all 24 episodes of its entirety on Crunchyroll now. However, that's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining. I truly appreciate all of your engagement, viewership, and support. I am Mel, the host of Mel, and you will catch me on another one. Bye!